Gotham Investigations. This episode is going to be with a former DEA agent. What happens when you're so undercover that you forget your own belief systems and who you really are? You're going to hear from a DEA agent who had to find himself once again and was able to find himself through Christianity. Gotham Investigations. Today, we are investigating an individual that was part of the DEA, but also how he transitioned out of the DEA and into Christianity. We are here with Omar Aleman. Omar was a minor league baseball player, and then he became a DEA agent. Tell us about your history on how you made that decision.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you, Jeffrey, for allowing me to share my life with you, whatever it is that we were able to do, that the Lord allowed us. I ended up being a federal agent because when I went to school, to college, the baseball coach just say, well, you have to declare a major. And I asked, what's the easiest major you got? What's the easiest thing? Can I just have baseball? He said, no, there's no such thing as baseball. So what's the easiest thing? I said, I'll take criminology. That's the easiest thing we got. So I got criminology with a minor in Spanish, I'm Cuban, and a minor in PE, never thinking that I was going to be in law enforcement. Well, I played minor league ball, and then like everything else, the ball got smaller and smaller, and it was harder and harder to hit. And the time came when I realized I didn't have the skills to do what I wanted to do, which was play Major League Baseball. So what did I have? I had a bachelor's degree in criminology, and then I got my master's, and what am I going to do? I ended up being a federal agent. So I ended up being a federal agent, not because I wanted to be a federal agent, it's because I was stupid enough not to look ahead, not understanding that, hey, you're not going to make it in the majors.
So did you see an ad in the paper? Was this a fascination from a TV show? How did you say the DEA? Recruiters
came to the campus. I was getting my master's. I wasn't 23 yet. The FBI wanted me. But to be an FBI agent, you had to be 23. I was 22. I needed a job. I was newly married. I said, I'll just do it for a couple of years and get a real job. I never thought I'd stay 32 years. I figured a couple of years and I'll be out. So I went with the DEA because I was only 22 and I was assigned to Miami right away. And of course, you can imagine a Cuban. In 1971, when I started, the first thing I did was I was out on the streets here of Miami doing my thing.
Now, I was with the City of Miami Police Department for 30 years. You were with the DEA for 32 years. I was in the street narcotics unit as an undercover drug buyer. You taught many of us back in the day, and I went to DEA school too, and I wouldn't be surprised if you taught that class in Daytona that I went to as well. You were the director of training, and one of our other buyers that I bought with wanted to ask you a couple questions there. Louis Diazle, he says that you have something very unique for the viewers and undercover officers, but he said, like us Italians, we call these informants rats. The state attorney's office calls them collaborating witnesses. What languages and what nationalities, they all have a name for it. Can you just name a few? And how should I view my informant as an officer? Because a lot of times people get a little friendly. Do we look at him as another police officer giving us so much information, or how do we view that?
It's an interesting thing because one of the most dangerous things working undercover and working narcotics are the informants. They are a two-bladed sword. I think of the movie The Natural. When Robert Redford was in the movie The Natural, he carved two bats. And he just go hit and hit and hit. And of course, the last game of the year, two men on base, two runs behind, he comes up, he hits a ball, looks like a home run. At the last minute, it turns foul. Comes back to the plate, his bat that he carved is broken. But he had carved a second one he'd given to the bat boy. The bat boy came and gave him the bat. He hit a home run and won the game. Informants are the same way. You hit with them, you hit with them, you hit with them, and when they crack, you throw them away. You don't continue to use an informant once he's compromised. The problem with us in the field is that in our desire to make a case, we fall in love with the informants. An informant, and I know this is hard to think of, I don't think of an informant as a human being. He's a tool. He's a tool to be used and used and used. In fact, if I wanted to make a case, a sudden case, you know what I would do? I would follow my informant. Why? You know he was going to make a dope deal. I mean, if I really needed a dope deal a case. The best guy you can make a case on is your informant. You use him, and then you arrest him.
And then you arrest him and have him use him some more.
Again!
And again and again.
That's the business. I know it sounds cruel, but narcotic trafficking is not a nice business. It's a filthy business.
So where were you stationed at for the majority of your career? Obviously, the Latin.
Yeah,
kind
I
of
was the second Cuban in DEA. I went from here to Caracas. We opened the office in Caracas, Venezuela in 73, 74. Then I went to Mexico City. Then I went to Portugal. Then I went to El Paso. And then from El Paso, I came back here the last 15 years of my career. I came back home. And then I ended up in training police officers such as yourself, the jump out boys, which, by the way, all this federal thing and international trafficking I did, that's all fine and dandy. But you know what? Real enforcement, it's not in Bolivia or in Colombia. Real enforcement is down here. Because let me tell you something. I learned more going out with the jump out boys about law enforcement than I ever learned about being with the big boys up in South America.
And that's the unit I worked in with jump out boys. I wasn't the jump out boy. I was the officer going in to buy the drugs and inform the jump out boys the description, and then they come in. And a lot of times they would never even know we're cops until we go to trial.
Yeah, let me say this to you. As much as I thought I was the trainer, let me say what I would do. I would go with the jump out boys so I can learn to teach other narcs, because that's where the training was. You see, you can talk and talk and talk all you want, but you got to be on the street being chased. That's what changes everything.
Fortunately, back then you could do real police work.
Oh, yes.
It's transitioned through the years to now. It's like police chiefs gauge their success in not getting into police shootings. Oh, I went a year. Oh, I went 2 years. Oh, I went 3 years. It's impossible to have units like that and not get into confrontations. I was involved in 2 separate shootouts myself. It's just confrontation, and that's enforcement. Now, being overseas, how true is it that we have to support some of these third world countries allowing some of this drug money to get in? We try to stop it at the border, but it comes out anyway.
That's an issue, because we go to those countries and we are under their umbrella. And the problem oftentimes is just like here, that we have a case and we go up the ladder, and let's face it, the guy who knows the most can give more information and get out of more. The person who knows the least about what's going on does the most time in prison. Well, the same thing happens overseas. The problem overseas is the political situation. We know that there are people involved in the business, but they are usually the general in charge of the police. And here you're working 2 sides against the middle. It's not dangerous in the sense of your life being in peril, but it's dangerous because the ambassador does not want any heat, and you work for the ambassador. You don't work for DEA, you work for the ambassador. And if you piss off the ambassador because of something you did with the general who goes to the president, then you're out. So it's a very sensitive situation. Let's face it. Who runs all these cartels? They're run politically overseas. Okay? If you notice, every other president in Latin America ends up in prison. And there's a reason for that. They're all in cahoots. Not all, but a lot of them are.
So technically, we could stop all this if we wanted to, but then to stop all this would be taking over governments, basically, in other countries.
You can't.
And we can't do that. And other countries would step in if we just didn't allow any income.
We go back to the same thing. You and I work supply. We can work supply until we're blue in the face. It's demand. If people don't take drugs, these people don't get rich. As long as people are taking drugs, we can't stop it because the demand just is too much for the supply.
So let's talk about the different levels. Obviously, you work the massive, huge, cocaine, kilos, heroin, and then it gets put down to the street. How hard is it to get like RICO cases on these individuals and prove that all that stuff is coming down to the street level? What different levels does it take to finally get to these schools and these kids?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because to get to the top, you very seldom. We're not that sharp. I am not that sharp to be able to go that deep in the cover to go up to the top. My job is to go as high as I can and then get those people, like you said, in a RICO type situation and work down. But the problem here oftentimes is like everything else. We arrest a big guy today and tomorrow somebody's already is in line because the profit margin is so high. So I knew as I was arresting, or we were going to arrest a quote unquote cartel, and we'd arrest 30, 40 people and seize $50 million and seize all kinds of kilos. Well, I'll tell you what, next week somebody else is taking their place because somebody's paying top money down here in South Florida to get stoned. By the way, one of the problems with South Florida is that drugs didn't come to South Florida. Drugs came through South Florida. In other words, a shipment is coming.
It's like a hub, like
Correct,
a Delta airline
correct.
hub for drugs.
So you got 100 kilos coming from Colombia on the way to Chicago. Somebody in South Florida has to handle the 100 kilos. You wonder how they get paid? They don't get paid cash. If it's 100 kilos, they get 2 kilos, and then the 98 goes to Chicago. What's the guy going to do with the 2 kilos locally? Put them on the street. So it wasn't so much that the dope was coming to here. Because it's so much coming through here and payment is being made by dope, you have so much supply.
Now there's different ways that they're bringing them through now. Before it used to be the boats. They're coming in on boats. Then they started with reptiles, putting them inside iguanas and lizards and turtles and stomach bags. What is one of the main things that they're bringing drugs in now? Because there's all kind of technology now.
Yeah, they continue. You know, one of the things that even now I'm surprised it's still going on. Back in the 70s and 80s, Colombia is very big with flowers. They're a very big flower import, and we're seeing more and more continue to where they come in with flowers. We had a seizure with the broccoli seizure. We had like 2,000 pounds of cocaine actually in broccoli. So, I mean, they come up with different things. I mean, if they can put it inside the stomach of an iguana, they can put it anywhere. And again, when you have the kind of demand, when people are paying that kind of money for drugs on the streets of Miami, somebody's going to sell it to them.
Now, do you still see Miami as being a hub for these drugs, or have they taken other avenues?
Well, obviously, the whole United States now is like a hub, but the issue is location. Okay? For instance, the whole idea of the drugs coming in from south to north, one of the advantages that the dope dealers have is like you pay money for this location, a lot of taxes to be able to be here. Well, in order for you to bring the drugs through the islands, you got to pay somebody off. One of the advantages that you've got is that you've got Haiti, because Haiti is a great place, not because of anything else, but because of the fact that for very little money, you can get your drugs through Haiti without any problems. So the whole idea is location. Not only is South Florida a location, but underneath us are people that are so compromised and so poor that it's an easy conduit to bring in a load from South America through. You don't go to Puerto Rico, you don't go to the Dominican Republic because you're going to get charged more. You go to Haiti where you can charge less, and there is no law enforcement per se.
Sure. Now, you worked intelligent, you worked a whole bunch of different things, and of course your claim to fame, and we'll get that out in a little bit, but what was your most enjoyable passion of your career? Was it buying? Was it intelligence? Was it training?
You know,
I know each one has its unique
You're right.
concept.
Right. Well, the real crux of my career is that I lost my identity. I became Omar Aleman. Omar Aleman was my undercover name. Now, Omar Aleman was the kind of guy that on Monday would fly in a private jet to Portugal or wherever. He'll go, Beirut, whatever. And he was an exciting guy. But come Friday, I would come home. I have a child and a wife. And now I have to be back to being myself. And my wife would tell me, change the diaper and mow the lawn. And I would look and say, you're talking to Omar Aleman. Well, the problem is I lost my identity. The guy that I loved the most, what I loved about this job was the freedom to be whoever I wanted. I became someone else who wasn't like me, boring. This guy was all over the world doing all this other stuff. I fell in love with Omar Aleman to where I lost myself. And it's taken me 30 years to recapture myself, because let me tell you something. Omar Aleman was in the flesh. He was fun. He used to take chances because he thought the government was behind him, so he would stretch it and stretch it and stretch it. And I became a real lowlife. High in terms of drug dealing, low in terms of morals. But the government uses anything they can to get the job done.
It's very hard to do that transition, like you were saying, me being in the street narcotics unit, the long hair, 10 to 15 hours a day working off crack grants. Sometimes you're working 6-7 days a week, and then the weekend comes, and like you said, now you have to be the family guy. After you're dealing with scum all week long, and you're kind of slowly transitioning, because if you You know, you live in Spain, you're going to start talking Spanish. If you live in New York, you're going to start having a New York accent. So obviously you're living the life knowing that you're a good guy, but it's just like impossible to be an on and off switch. So did that take a toll on your family life?
Without a doubt. You lose sight of who you are. I lost my family, and as you know, law enforcement, because of what we do, it takes a toll on our families. When my son came to me and said, I want to be a federal agent, I said, no, no, no. And it's not because it's not a good job. It's because the family, and I'm sure your family suffered a lot. I lost my wife, and I don't blame her. That's because she married Omar Aleman, and all of a sudden she's married to Omar Azam. She's married to a stranger. So in order to cope with that, she went her own way. She had to survive. And then there came a time when we went in separate directions. We got divorced without knowing we were divorced.
There should definitely be, like in local law enforcement, state law enforcement, like a 2 to 3 year cap on being an undercover officer, because you transition and you just lose sight of who you are.
Yeah, it's amazing because when I used to train you guys, a guy who was in motorcycles, he comes in. Now, a guy who's in motorcycles for 2 years, all of a sudden, he's told to be a narc. Well, you know, it's a long way from motorcycles to being a narc. And all of a sudden, a motorcycle guy who is strictly, now he has the freedom of doing the things we did. And let me tell you something, to transfer back into a 9 to 5, follow the rules, let me tell you something, that's not for the weak of heart. We don't want to leave the undercover. We must be taken out. If it's up to us, we're not leaving. But there must be term limits.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's an adrenaline rush that you can't explain it to the audience, for people that, even a regular policeman that gets in a car chase, that gets a shooting, that pulls up on armed robberies. You seek, it's kind of like crack cocaine, I hate to say it, but you're always seeking that high that you once had. And you can go a month, a week, a day, a year with no action whatsoever, but that moment you get that adrenaline flow, you live it. It's a dream.
In our cases, now that we're old, we look back and we say, we must have been out of our minds. But at the time, we thought it was normal.
Yeah, no, I mean, the sentence there, you're old. Okay, now I don't put me in the we group there, but
but you know what I'm talking about.
I know.
You know what I'm talking about.
Past our time, now we look back, hindsight's always 20/20. You're like, my God, I could have been freaking killed for people that really don't give a shit about what we've done and where we've been.
And by the way, you and I worked at a time when it was fun to work the streets. We cannot work the streets today. In the old days, if an informant ripped you off for $200, you didn't write a report. You went on the street, you kicked his ass, you took his watch, and you pawned it and got that $200 back. I mean, I know it sounds bad, but that's how we did it.
That's how we did it.
Because I had to have credibility with my informants. I can't write a report every time they rip me off.
But and my tactic would be, I would take these guys to the gangs. There was all gang locations there, and if he kind of like backstabbed me or wasn't giving me the information I want, I'd put him out of the car, pat him down. Hey, these the guys you're talking about? Put him back in the fucking car. Go arrest a couple guys. You won't see this fucking guy again because he knows his ass would be killed if he doesn't get the hell out of town.
It's called checks and balances. We got to have checks and balances. And again, without informants, we can't survive. And at the same time, they'll kill us.
So you had a big assignment, and that was taking Noriega back to the United States. Tell us your involvement, how that came about, and what was your involvement in Noriega?
Yeah, in 1973, I was stationed in Mexico City, and I was involved in the intelligence unit. There was a meeting at the U.S. Embassy in El Salvador, and I went representing DEA. There I met Noriega, and I was introduced to him by George Bush Sr., who at the time was the director of the CIA. Well, Noriega was an informant of the CIA and then became an informant with DEA. Well, for a while, I was involved with Noriega in terms of payments and interviewing him. He became an informant. So I knew him very well. He liked me because I used to pay money. I mean, obviously, I would meet him everywhere. Not only myself, but another agent. Anyway, the years went by, and I went on with my career, and he became the number 2 guy, and he was the number 2 guy then, became the dictator of Panama. And the same George Bush that introduced me to him became his nemesis because of all the problems in Panama. Well, in 1989, December of 1989, we invade Panama. I'm minding my own business down here. I'm the director of training. I'm not on the street anymore. I got a call from Washington. You got to go on the invasion of Panama. Well, why me? Well, you know him very well. You're going to bring him back. You're going to interview him. You're going to interrogate him because you work with him. So I don't want to go. I fought it. But they sent me to Panama. And then on January 3rd, 1990, he gets arrested by the military, and then you can see the CNN tapes. He sent that over to me, to DEA, and then we put the handcuffs on him. And as I'm going up the C-130 to bring him back to the United States, and I'm handcuffed to him, I realized we both are fugitives. He's a fugitive from the law, and I'm a fugitive from God. I had recently become a Christian, and I was, just like I was an agent, I was an undercover Christian.
So you do have a strong faith. Tell us how that plane ride just kind of changed your view of life and up until your retirement and now what you do.
Yeah, like I said, in 1985 I became a Christian, but I became an undercover Christian like most people at church today are undercover Christians. I mean, the people you sit next to in the pew, you thought we worked undercover? Those are experts. Christians are the most expert undercover people I've ever known. Because on Sunday, ooh, the hands are up, everything's going on. You talk to them on Wednesday, they're another animal. So I was one of those. I was an undercover Christian. For 4 years, I was hiding in the back. Nobody knew I was a Christian because I was undercover. And then that day, when I go on the plane, I realize, hold on a minute, he's running from the law, I'm running from God. So instead of interrogating like I'm supposed to on that ride from Panama to Miami, he brought a Bible that was given to him by the Catholic bishop there in Panama. He brought a Bible. Instead of interrogating him, I read him scripture. And I read him about two fallen leaders, King Saul and King David. And I said to him, you and I are fallen leaders. We can either be like King Saul and be a failure, or we can be like King David and be a real leader. So when I got to Miami, of course, they said, okay, what did he tell you? And then they said, he didn't tell me anything because I didn't let him talk. I spoke to him for 3.5 hours about scripture. That did not go over well. So much so that I became a witness for the defense instead of the prosecution. The defense meaning, isn't it true that you went to pick up my client? Yeah. And instead of interrogating him, you read him scripture. What kind of a criminal is my client?
Hey, well, that's faith. You know,
That's faith.
Maybe that brought you to him to give a last bit of hope, a little common sense of who he really is inside.
Well, think about it, Jeffrey. If I can testify about my love for Christ in the biggest stage in the world that night, because nothing was bigger than that night, than the invasion, to me to do it that, knowing the heat that I was going to suck from my own people, testifying to a guy at Publix now, it's nothing. Right?
So technically, you that's when your faith just came front.
Right. And I was tested, and don't get me wrong, to this day I don't know what overcame me. I mean, it's insanity. You don't do that. That's complete insanity what I did. But it helped me as a Christian.
What tips would you give an undercover officer today for safety purposes, just dealing with informants for safety purposes when they're doing those buys? Because now, let's face it, they can see your picture on the internet, Facebook, social media. It's much harder being an undercover officer and staying an undercover officer.
Yeah, and you really underscored that earlier. The whole idea of being an undercover officer today is just understanding there's term limits, understanding that this is only for a time, that you can't fall in love with that. It's a job. The problem, and it's a good thing today because the way that the chiefs and management puts it, it becomes a job. When you and I were on the street, we kind of juke and jived and fit it to our own way of doing things, right?
Exactly.
In other words, if my supervisor told me, well, I want you to work undercover this way, I said, well, then you work undercover. Okay? If I'm working undercover, okay. Today, the good thing about all this control is that these undercover agents need to understand that even though it sounds like it's control, they need that because of the fact that they're only there for a while. I don't recommend, like you said, for anybody to be there for more than a couple of years. Don't fall in love with undercover, and don't fall in love with the informants. And let me say this to you as a law enforcement officer, and this is hard to say. The most dangerous people I met in my life carried a gun and a badge. Why? A criminal, I knew who he was. But you know who hurt me more in my career? The guy in my office. I got hurt more in my career by my supervisors than I did by a drug dealer. And that's because of the way that the system operates. So It doesn't mean you don't get along with the people around you, but understand you have to be aware of your environment, not only on the street, but in the office.
You have to be aware of trust and faith and see who you're next to, because that individual, don't say, oh, we're a team, this can't be said. If there's more than one person, it's going to be said.
Yeah.
And everyone, even if they create a story to save their own skin,
Correct.
They're going to do it.
Yeah, they are. And again, let me tell you something. I would not function very well as undercover agent today, because what made me what I was the freedom.
The freedom, correct, yes.
And unfortunately, because of the way things are today, they don't have that freedom, which begs the question, how high can you go up the ladder if you don't have the freedom to act and be like a dope dealer? That's just the question.
So all these officers, not just undercover officers, not just narcotic officers, police officers in general, what message of faith can you give them? Suicides are super high amongst police officers. You see it through all the states, and that's because you'll see like a good officer being arrested for some stupidity that he's just being a political scapegoat. A lot of suicides are out there. What would you tell police officers today how they could find their faith, and if they go into Christianity, what group would you recommend, and how does that group help people?
Well, one of the things, and I'll finish with this, is that a few years ago I had my own business, Aleman and Associates, and I sold it to Christ, and now I work for Jesus and Associates. They say, what's Jesus and Associates? Well, Jesus and Associates is the company I work for. How would we comport ourselves if we truly believe that we work for Jesus and Associates? You see, I am here answering your questions, and my boss is Jesus Christ. So the question here is, how am I going to comport myself in the world, in the station, with my neighbors, with my wife? Understanding we have to do what we have to do in the station, but remembering who your boss is. Your boss is your sergeant, your lieutenant, I understand that. But the real boss you work for it's not what you say, is what you do. Because if you're a Christian, they're watching you. They're watching your every step. And if you don't put Jesus as the real boss, things are not going to go well. I am very thankful to be involved with one organization, when you ask about organizations, that really are at the heart of helping particularly men in the business of blending their profession with their faith. And that's CBMC, the Christian Businessman Connection. We have a lot of men that are involved, a lot of cops that are involved because of that, because we need to be able to blend in some way the things that we do in the flesh, in the world, with our Christian walk in the spirit. And for those that are interested in getting involved with CBMC, there's a number I'm going to give you now, because I think it would be a great help for those out there that are trying to do this work against all odds. And the only one that can break those odds is Jesus. The number is 954-805-0351. That's 954-805-0351, CBMC, Christian Businessman Connection. And by the way, trust me, cops are businessmen. You know what? They're taking care of the people's business.
Detectives out there, police officers out there, you're not alone. There is help. There are groups you could talk to. This is a brotherhood that goes far beyond the badge. Omar Aleman, thank you, and I appreciate you so much for coming out here and spreading your story, not only of your hard work and dedication, thank you for that, for making our streets safe, but also your commitment to Christianity. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. Have a great day.
Are you a fan of our show? Do you like our show? Then subscribe to Gotham Investigations, comment, and hit the like button, or you might be the next one we investigate.